All right, so let's talk about the clouds. We're going to start this week off with GCP. GCP notoriously does a very bad job of covering their own news here. This was actually an interesting blog post about the STAC M3. So if you don't know what the STAC M3 is, it's basically a benchmarking for time series data, and they did a really good job at upping that. Now, this is interesting here. You'll see that they have 9 terabytes of local NVMe SSDs. And actually getting these, I haven't actually seen that to be that available on, here we go, where is it? Anyways, I digress. We don't need to talk about that right now and their SSDs, but they did a really good job. It was a decent write-up from Google. I'm not always impressed with their write-ups, but actually this one was fairly good, talking about their resource on demand. So I would recommend reading it. I only ever skimmed it, but it was fairly good. Not only that, though, let's talk about this was an article on why cloud beats or AWS GCP beats AWS in channel. But for me, the biggest thing that was actually released by man, can't keep my cloud straight, by GCP was their Alloy DB for PostgreSQL. So this is a fully managed PostgreSQL compatible database service for your most demanding enterprise. When I see PostgreSQL compatible, I always wonder, is it not powered by Postgres? This is interesting because they've done this before. They've done this before with things like their managed Prometheus. Isn't actually Prometheus in the back end. And it gets a little funky. I'm not actually a huge fan of it. I would rather Prometheus as a service just be Prometheus. That would be my preference here, because then it gives you the things that you're accustomed to, the settings that you're accustomed to, and it operates the same way that you're accustomed to. Even if your own custom thing is technically a little bit better, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure that that's the best way to go about it. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. I do believe that they don't use. They probably use Bigtable. That's what they always do. They're like, oh, it's powered by Bigtable. No. Don't look. It's just the skin. Let's see if it says. I would guess that it's like powered by SQLite. Again, they emphasize that it's full compatibility. They never state that it is PostgreSQL. Let's see. See, they say that it's better. It's 4 times faster than standard PostgreSQL. Okay, what trade-offs though? Because again, this is what always comes up, is like they will use their own custom thing. I didn't look through all of this to find it for you all, but I'm sure that they state what it's based off of. Well, I'll have to find it. If anybody knows, go ahead and leave a shout out. Anyways, if you're using it, managed services are always a really great way to get your projects started. You can always migrate if it's truly actually compatible and they have an export path. Another reason why I would prefer just managed Postgres is because then I know how I can export it to a non-managed service. It's like with Google's, again, I'll go with their managed Prometheus. There is no real good export path because it's not actually Prometheus in the back end, and I really don't like that. So again, I think that this is good. I love Postgres. It's kind of the ubiquitous open source database, but I'm just not sure. And it sounds like it's really good. So if you're in GCP, I wouldn't hesitate to use it on my project. That's not my quandary. I just would have preferred that it actually be Postgres. That's it. This I found to be a shame. As we'll see a little bit later, Web3 kind of burned down. I'm going to actually talk a little bit about Web3 in the future, but Google has earned a little bit of my respect for saying, Web3 isn't exactly what you want it to be, or isn't what you expect it to be, or isn't necessarily something that we need. Now, just because this says that they're a new team for Web3, I didn't find any GCP related news on it. I don't doubt they have engineers that are working on it, as I've seen several other articles that hint at the same thing, including Business Insider. But the thing is, there's good Web3 and there's bad Web3. Most everybody that talks about Web3 is talking about the bad Web3. But, you know, I believe it's Walmart and IBM have really great supply chain that's built on blockchain type technologies. And this is, now, interestingly, there is no token along with that. And so you can be working on some sort of blockchain technology that isn't bad and is actually solving a really, really good problem. So just because they have a new team for Web3 infrastructure doesn't actually mean anything. It could be something like that, or it could just be investigating the uses. Because again, one of the problems with Web3 or blockchain, as I'd like to talk about it, because again, I think Web3 is a way to sell you on something. But the issue with blockchain is there's actually a lot of different uses. I think that's one of the big problems with blockchain is people are kind of stuck on the wrong usage. So anyways, it's not just necessarily bad, but they did earn my respect in saying, hey, look, I'm not sure that this is actually a great technology. So hopefully they keep a critical eye on it as they move forward. All right, that's it for GCP. Let's talk about AWS. I think all the clouds had a decent amount of stuff going on, which I was really happy about. We have a lot of cloud news. So I believe we talked lightly about this last week, but the Sagemaker serverless interface for machine learning without worrying about servers, basically they're making all of their machine learning stuff serverless, so it's a lot easier to use. So you and I can go out there and spin it up. But not only is it a little bit easier to use that way, the one thing I like about it is I don't have to spin up these big, beefy ML machines that have GPUs attached to it. I get this nice, simple, easy interface that, while it's still kind of expensive, it only uses the required resources. So if you're wanting to play around and don't have the hardware to do it at home, then this absolutely makes sense. Now, I would caution you, you probably have the hardware at home. Your CPU and your laptop can probably do it. It might take longer, but you can probably do it. So you don't need this. And trim your data set down. That's one thing that I've been playing around with my machine learning is don't do the biggest data set. Is it going to be as good? Probably not. But that's okay. You're just experimenting. All right. They add new management features to EC2 key pairs. This has been vastly in need. EC2 has not been the new shiny thing, and so it hasn't gotten a whole lot of love, and it's finally getting a little bit of love. And so this is really nice to see, as EC2 key pair support has been not great. AWS Private Link announces support for IPv6. If you don't know what Private Link is a highly available, scalable technology that enables you to privately connect your VPC to supported AWS services. Services hosted in other AWS accounts and third-party SaaS services. So if you don't know what Private Link is, this is what Private Link is. Private link is a way for you to connect different networks privately. It's a private network. Things like Cloudflare, this is probably one of their big things, is that private network that you get. But private link in AWS, another really useful way of it is, let's say that I manage some machines for you as a managed service. Let's say I manage a coffee service. But to really get the power of the coffee service, you want to actually access it directly and through a direct channel from your AWS account to my AWS. So I could put your coffee service in its own VPC away from other people's for multi-tenancy and give you a private link to that VPC. So recently it's gotten support for IVP6, which is huge because if you've ever dealt with VPC peering or private link, you can get conflicts of interest with your IPs that you use, and IPv6 just actually lets you ignore this problem. It's actually really fantastic that they bring this to it because it's a problem, and with this, it's just not a problem anymore. So anyways, super cool. Sorry if I ranted a little bit on private link. I actually really like private link. I'll hate on a lot of things AWS, but yeah, not private link. All right, I do think Cloudflare's private link, but private network is better. Cloudflare does a lot of things really well, especially its security and zero trust things. But yeah. All right, so this kind of caught me by surprise. IBM signed strategic collaboration agreement with Amazon Web Services. What really surprises me about this, so honestly, this isn't like that big of a deal when you're talking about IBM, it's fine. I think IBM puts Red Hat in a weird position here, because Red Hat is supposed to be this ubiquitous thing across clouds. It's this open source project, but when your parent company signs a agreement like this, where they're going to basically, you're going to be able to buy IBM's SaaS products on AWS's marketplace and the likes like that, so you're going to be able to go and get IBM SaaS products in the AWS marketplace. It makes it a little, I don't know. I think it's a little, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if it puts them in a weird spot or not. But yeah, IBM is coming to Amazon Web Services. So if this is actually kind of cool, because you can now spend your AWS spend on IBM stuff. So it's actually going to make IBM stuff much more available across the board. It's gonna basically make it so that you can just use IBM from within AWS and manage it all in the same area. That's kind of nice. That's kind of nice. It's a good move for IBM, I think, for sure. All right, so Amazon Lex launches support for phrase hints. I've been thinking about playing around with Amazon Lex just to get an idea of doing it. But anyways, this was an update for them. So if you're using AWS Lex, go ahead and check this out, because this might bring some new options to you in your lexicon. Yeah, okay. Moving on to AWS, and good morning to those of you who just joined. We're going to do the intro thing right after this. If you notice, I have started a little bit earlier. We'll talk about why I'm starting earlier. I've been talking about why I was start earlier, but yeah. All right, so no, I do not want to give you a free thing. All right, I'm putting this in the Microsoft Cloud News, even though it's Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, because I think cloud providers could use it. Basically, Microsoft Defender is a security vulnerability threat detection software, and this is allowing you to do it at like an enterprise level. I think that it's something that will be part of if not already part of Microsoft Cloud, especially if you use Windows servers. I don't know that anybody actually uses Windows servers. If they are, they're probably a communist because I don't know. You don't use Windows servers in the cloud, do you? I'm just teasing for all of you who got offended that use Microsoft Windows. You should use a Linux server though. All right, so this was really cool. Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 1 to Gen 2. So Gen 1 is getting deprecated and removed. And I thought that this was really cool. Basically, you can let Microsoft do it for you, do the migration for you. Basically, you can just sign up for it and they will do the migration from Gen 1 to Gen 2 for you. You just have to provide consent and the portal will do it for you. So you don't even have this, oh, you have to do this manual migration. Microsoft said we'll do it. I love it when cloud providers do this. Microsoft isn't the only one. Well, okay, GCP doesn't do this because GCP just kills the product altogether. GCP is just like, now we're done. We're done. We did that for 3 years. It sucked. We're done. Azure, I've seen actual manual migrations. I also have seen other migrations. So I don't know if this is something that Azure always does. Again, I don't use Azure as much, or if this is just because it was easy enough to do. So not sure, but I do like seeing that they do this. It's full end-to-end support. You get a product, and Gen 2 is better for a lot of reasons. In this case, for just a lot of reasons, it's better. They want you on that, and it behooves them to help you get there because that's the full end-to-end support. So anyways. All right. Azure Container Apps now support log streaming and Console Connect. So I do believe I brought this up because this was a big deal to me when it was in alpha. It's now in preview, so it's out there where you can use it, but you can log streaming. You can use log streaming in Azure Container Apps. Azure Container Apps is kind of like the serverless for your container. Like you want to run a container, but you don't want to run Kubernetes. And even though Azure's Kubernetes service is pretty good, you don't want to do that. So you're using their container apps. You can now stream their logs, which is very important when you're doing that. Static web apps support skipping API via Azure pipelines. So this is just bringing their static web apps. I don't use this. Again, just thought you guys might be interested in that. Azure SQL, so they made, so as they go generally available, they up their SLA. So they got the 4 nines of SLA for the Azure SQL. So if you were using that or looking at using that and the SLA was the thing keeping you from doing it, Azure has now made it generally available and given it 4 nines of SLA. That is one of the things that you have to watch with cloud providers. It really is. Their SLAs are usually per product. So you can't say Azure has 5 or 6 nines of an SLA. That's not true. They have 3.5 for EKS management nodes. They have 4.5 for EC2 nodes. It's all over the place. And you have to know the services themselves. Because another thing, if you provide a product on top of their service, and you provide an SLA, then you've got to know what your underlying SLAs are as well so that you can make a reasonable assumption about your SLAs on top of that. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out, like not all SLAs are the same. And when Azure brings something to general availability, they give it themselves an SLA, but this is SLA for Azure SQL database. This isn't for Azure generally available things. This is the SLA for Azure SQL database. And it goes through its own, there's a whole list of all of its general terms and details for this specific service. Again, I've seen this bite some people in the hind end. And I'm just trying to alleviate that. You should know all of your services SLAs because it's really the grouping of all of them. All right, so let's talk about some failures on Microsoft because Those are always fun. I don't know. Microsoft seems to fail spectacular. They fail very publicly when they fail. Um, Now, Google, to be fair, Google did this too, where they made all their Wi-Fi units have to phone home to actually work, and then their authentication went down, and so everybody's internet went out. Because, again, another reason I would never trust a Google piece of hardware, because their Wi-Fi had to phone home to give you internet, to give you Wi-Fi. That was horrifying. Anyways, Microsoft also has a tendency of failing very badly, and Windows Update causes authentication failures. So basically, if you were on the bleeding edge and updated to the new Windows 11, then Azure AD would also fail your login. So it was interesting because it was actually security vulnerabilities that they fixed that caused this to happen. I don't know the exact fix, but they did fix it so that you can now so that you can log in. But that was basically what happened. It was pretty funny. Whenever people can't log in, I feel like that's a pretty big mess up. And as we did talk about a little bit earlier, I never know whether to cover this in security or the cloud news because it's both, so I'm covering it in both. I talked about it a little bit. Microsoft is launching security services to help people fight off ransomware and other attacks, so they're boosting their security presence. They've been doing this. Azure as a whole has a lot, like the Azure Firewall, Advanced Firewall is probably one of the best from the primary clouds. If we're not talking about CloudFlare, I would say that Azure's firewall and whatnot is actually one of the best from what I've seen. But yeah. All right. So the last thing on Microsoft Cloud News, I don't even know if this is cloud news. I found this as funny news. EVE Online. It's finally happening. EVE Online has been described as a spreadsheet simulator. Microsoft is pairing up with EVE to bring a spreadsheet plugin so that Excel can be the ultimate EVE Online gaming utility. I don't even know why I'm covering this. But that's happening. Let's get on to the real cloud news. There is another person in the cloud news. And we have a lot to cover. They had a lot of news. Some of it is a couple weeks old because I don't cover them strategically a lot because they're not a big cloud provider. But I have been warning, if you've been watching over the last couple months, I have been warning that these people are starting to become a real cloud contender. Who might that be? Well, you guys probably have already guessed that I am talking about none other than CloudFlare. So Cloudflare had a string of announcements over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about it. Most of us know Cloudflare as, most of us know Cloudflare as like the security, zero trust, private network. That's what I knew them as for the longest of time. But as they have been going, they have been adding on more cloud features. You can run a container if you want. They have Lambda functions or functions. They have an object store now as well. So as they keep going, they keep adding these tools, and they had a slew of things. So StackBlitz teamed up with Cloudflare to bring the so this is something that you're going to see, this Wrangler version here, making even easier to get started with Workers. So Workers is their technology, and it's going to make it where you can actually just do it in your browser, because StackBlitz is a web-based code editor, and basically they made a UI on top of the worker so you can just make the worker in your web browser. You don't have to do anything locally, and you can just run with it. But this isn't where Cloudflare stopped. Cloudflare went on with a object storage for R2, and it's entering open beta. I know we talked about it previously, but I wasn't actually able to get access to it. Now I'm going to be able to, and I'm going to play around with it, and we're going to see how this worked. Yeah, in September they announced they're building their own object storage. So again, this is going to be an object storage. This is huge about it. It has an S3 compatible API. Why is this huge? Why is this huge? I'll tell you. Right after this coffee break. Not commercial break, coffee break. Why is S3 compatibility huge? If you bring an object storage, there is one de facto API that everyone supports. It shouldn't be S3 compatible. It should be the open object storage API at this point. It's what everybody uses. S3 made it popular. S3 was the first one to do object storage, and they did it. So what this means is that you can take your S3 compatible app, point it to a new backend, and all of a sudden it's still working. It's still working, and it's fantastic. So object storage, check. Container runtime, check. Cloudflare is really starting to bring on, really bringing it on. Now, I wish that they had called this D2, because then we would have had R2 D2. I don't know if they would have gotten in trouble for that, but they should have. There's maybe another naming convention that's going on. D1, their first SQLite database. Now we have object storage. Okay, object storage. We have our workers. We now have an SQL. So if you want to do relational database, they also have their durable object. So if you don't know what the durable object is, that's something that was released earlier. But they now have an SQLite database as well. Now this is built on top of SQLite. They have a pretty good blog article explain. Another reason I love Cloudflare is when they go through, you don't get a better, and so this is again from their worker. This is their Lambda serverless, blah, blah, blah. You don't get a better explanation. Not one cloud does it as well. This is pretty cool. And yeah, it's built on SQLite, which was an interesting choice. They go a little bit into why they did SQLite. You should definitely check it out if you'd want. They do really good articles. I talked about Azure brought out a sub-millisecond latency streaming. Cloudflare has as well. This is pretty cool. Just like dash formats playback over RTMS, RTMPS, and SRT cost $1 per 1,000 minutes delivered, regardless of video encoding settings used. That seems really cheap to me. Like, don't get me wrong. That just seems really cheap. What do you mean by sub-second? This is really fast. Again, Azure was also playing around with this sub-second stuff. So this is pretty cool. Maybe we'll do something with it. Maybe we'll have a stream about streaming and programming our own streaming. I don't even know how that would work because we'd have to have something else to stream, but that sounds like a fun challenge to take on. Let me know if you'd like that. I think next weekend we're doing a stream. It's going to be hacking if nobody wants anything else. So next weekend we're doing hacking if you want to join us. We had fun. People seem to like it. I'm going to do it next Saturday again if people want to join. Hopefully other people will join because it was only with you guys that I figured that out. Definitely not a great hacker myself, but that's going to happen next weekend if you guys would all like next Saturday. If you'd like to do something else, like let's make an app on Cloudflare, we can also do those. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the Discord. And we'll make some other streams. I have to prioritize my time, so I can't do everything. But we'll do it. All right, let's talk about open source community to create new API standards for the application of the future. So this is an interesting I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on that. Basically, Cloudflare is trying to work with open source communities to develop API standards for applications. Now we have things like OpenAPI version 3, but they're doing more than just that with like the worker runtime. This was really cool. So they open sourced their Cloudflare worker runtime with the Apache 2 licensing. Why is this cool? Because it makes it more extensible. Not only that, it's a great learning experience because you can go here and you can check it out and you can learn from it. Anyways, this is pretty cool. They are working on expanding their developer ecosystem with things like we were talking about here, where they're making it easier with StackBlitz. This is the developer ecosystem. They're looking to expand it. And they are introducing custom domains for workers. This was something that I had previously called them out for, was that there was no way to use a custom domain for your worker. So like there was no ingress controller on top of it. So it really only made sense for like behind the scenes things. And basically they fixed this. You can read about how they did it with Cloudflare DNS, which basically in this way is like a big API gateway at this point. Cloudflare DNS. Cloudflare DNS is fantastic if you haven't used it. So yeah, this is cool, and I'm glad that they actually finally got this. More Cloudflare, I know. And if you notice, this was just from the 12th. We are on the cutting. They did so much this week. Cloudflare is probably going to get their own clip in the clips, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. If you don't know what I'm talking about in the clips, I have something for you guys. Okay, so they're announcing PubSub, programmable MQTT-based messaging. So this is basically a messaging. If you don't know my thoughts on messaging, if you're running microservices, you have to have a messaging backbone. The whole asynchronous, even if you're doing gRPC, it should be avoided. Everything should have a gRPC interface, but that synchronous gRPC message should be avoided. You should work on a messaging queue. Most likely that message is fine to have a half a second or a quarter second delay. There is so much you can do with it that doesn't need to be synchronous. So avoid it. And another thing that I want to point out here is generally, everything I've seen from Cloudflare has been of the highest quality. It's been really solid and just really well done, really well thought out. They haven't rushed to release all of the services. They have made really good services and released them when they're ready. All right. Durable object alarms. Durable objects is something we talked about, I don't know, in like September when they released them. And now they have alarms. So durable objects can now alarm for you. So each durable object can be set up to do specific alarming. I don't actually know a use for this because I haven't used durable objects. They give some examples. So if you don't know what a durable object is, it's a CRDT, which is a conflict resolution, or a conflict-free replicated something or other. They have the conflict-free replicated data type. There we go. So basically, it's a way for multiple things to be using the same data type and resolve conflicts. Conflict-free and resolving conflicts. Is my wife and I's relationship conflict-free, or is it that we just resolve conflicts? I don't know. I guess you could say it either way. But anyways. So a durable object alarm allows you to, from within the durable object, to schedule an object to be woken in the future when the alarm's scheduled time comes. So these things can go to sleep. It's how they do cost reduction. And you can use it from cron jobs, or there's other triggers that you can use, like from your actions. So there's all these triggers that now can be used to wake up even other objects. So if you're using like functions as well, and you want to pre-warm something if something starts happening in a durable object, you can do that and pre-warm stuff. So that's our cloud news. That was a lot, I know. Thankfully, I started a little early, so we have this extra time. But Cloudflare has really been stepping it up as far as their cloud. They're really starting to become a fully fledged cloud. In fact, I think that it would not be weird to state that Cloudflare, you can build your whole app on Cloudflare. Your entire SaaS, your entire software stack could be Cloudflare at this point. That is not a crazy or ridiculous thing. Now, they have some caveats, and I got into an argument with a friend I have. I really respect his opinion. We don't always agree on everything. Is that conflict free? I don't think so. But he was stating that like you could do everything on Cloudflare. And while that's possible, there really are, for it to be really taken seriously, there are a few things Cloudflare is still missing. They are missing things like EC2 and Kubernetes providers. Now, my friend would argue that you just shouldn't architect your app to use those things. But what if your app uses something like Cluster API? Cluster API allows you to manage Kubernetes clusters in a declarative way. If you leverage Cluster API, you'd have to rewrite all of Cluster API. You couldn't use the open source's version of it because it's an operator that runs on Kubernetes, and Cloudflare doesn't provide a Kubernetes, a managed Kubernetes. And so I really do think that they need to have these things to be in the big, to play with the big boy. I don't know the right terminology for that, but I do think that they really, really need those. Now, that being said, everything that they've provided so far has been something that has been really easy to use and really well done. I'm not hating on them for that. I'm just stating that there is, for some companies, a requirement to have some of these more advanced things. Thanks for watching this Null Byte. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and check out the links below for my other content that I release. This was a small bite of the weekly show that I put on every single Monday morning around Kubernetes, tech, and cloud news. See you next week.